first of all, expect it to feel awful, right? Like these are high pressure things. It's not going to feel good. If you're waiting for it to feel good before you make your decision or before you take action, you're going to be too slow and you'll never actually take action. And people expect that. It's like, well, if I had everything set up properly and if I knew enough about the scenario, then when I pulled the trigger on this project, it would feel easy. It's not. It's never going to feel easy.
Thank you for listening to the Interesting People You Meet podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Newground Financial. Newground Financial is a full-service investment and insurance brokerage firm that specializes in employee benefit plans, corporate insurance, and retirement planning. Newground Financial serves the provinces of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, Ontario, and Alberta. Find out more at newgroundfinancial.com. Thank you for liking, sharing, and commenting on the Interesting People You Meet podcast across all of your favorite listening platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. By doing so, you are ensuring that more great people just like you have the opportunity to hear from our guests. Thank you, and enjoy the show. We want to welcome Kevin Sear to the podcast for episode number 20 of the Interesting People You Meet. This is our first episode in 2023. Thank you so much for joining us. Kevin is a policing professional based in Western Canada with experience across the full spectrum of policing operations. His areas of interest are the legalities of policing and the application of decisive leadership principles to achieve operational success and sound organizational management. Kevin holds a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from St. FX University, a Certificate of Policing Leadership from Dalhousie University, and a Master of Laws in Criminal Law and Procedure from York University. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks very much.
Absolutely. So we're really excited. We call this the Interesting People You Meet. We bring folks on from all different walks of life. You are our first police officer on the podcast. We're super grateful to have you here to learn more about your story and really the industry and how policing can relate and sometimes cross over into the tactics, understanding, education that you receive. Perhaps and how we may be able to use some of that training in our own business experience to serve our clients better and ensure we're better folks for it. So, Kevin, as we get started here, can you tell us a bit about your story?
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you where I'm at currently. Currently, I'm the officer in charge of the Lower Mainland District Integrated Emergency Response Team. So we're a SWAT team. We're the second largest in Canada and one of the largest in North America. We hit about 230 calls per year. So if anyone in the SWAT world would know that's a pretty big number. I've got 63 full-time officers on my team. So we're one of the bigger names in the game. I came up through the ranks. I started out in a small town in northern British Columbia. When I started policing, then I went down to like kind of mid-sized city, and then I've been in the Lower Mainland ever since 2010. So during that time, I've done everything from general patrol work, work in uniform and humping radio calls, to major crime work, criminal intelligence, doing organized crime and gang intel work, drug section, and homicides. And then I finally landed in the SWAT world, or ERT, and I think that's probably where I'll round up the end of my career as the sun sort of sets on my career. I think that's probably where I'll end up.
Amazing. And what is it that made you want to become a police officer?
I don't know. It just always seemed to be that was going to be the way it was going to be. And, one of my earliest memories was as a kid, waving to the RCMP officers. He drove by my elementary school and him waving back and me running home and telling my mom that. When I finished my math degree, because they say no one takes math to go be a cop. It's just not what you do. But I was interested in physics and math, so I did my mathematics undergrad. I had an opportunity to go do my master's in software engineering, and that would have been in 2000, so that would have been fairly lucrative. I had a job offer as an actuary with a consulting firm, which also would have been lucrative. And then the Mounties called me and said they had a position for me because I'd been, exploring a few different branches as to what I was going to do. And I just kind of wanted to drive a car with lights and sirens and go fight bad guys. So that's what I did.
Cool. And is it the earliest memory of the RCMP officers of what chose you to use, to join the RCMP or versus, another policing organization?
Well, I mean, when I joined, this was 2000 is when I was applying. There wasn't the internet. You couldn't just go online and research every police agency. So being an East Coast guy, born and raised, I guess I wasn't born in the East Coast. I don't know why I said that. I certainly spent my whole childhood there. The RCMP was the police force we knew, and it was the one I could apply to. So I was looking at that one and OPP, but I was really looking for a police agency that had a SWAT team, and those were the only two that I knew of. Now, I mean, looking back, every major agency has one. Every major agency accepts applications from outside people outside the province or outside the city. I could have done it, but I just didn't have access to the information. So it's sort of by default that, through sheer market share alone, the RCMP was able to capture my application.
Nice.
Yeah. You briefly, sorry, Nick, you briefly touched on it earlier, kind of like the process of starting out as just like a patrol officer, working your way all the way up to, I guess, the leader of the SWAT team. Can you go a little bit deeper on that and kind of tell us about your journey and kind of where it started and obviously where it's finished at now?
Yeah, sure. So when you go through Depot, you go through most of the 6 months not having zero clue where they're going to post you, and you really have no idea. And so they ask you, hey, where do you want to go? And I said, well, I certainly want to go to British Columbia. I just did. I kind of wanted to get away from home and kind of do my own thing for a little bit. And I asked for cities. Like there's certain cities like Kelowna and Kamloops that I was really interested in, like in the Okanagan, sunny Okanagan. I'd heard lots of great things about them. And so then when they have your staffing meeting where they give everyone their postings, they said, Kevin, you're going to New Hazelton. And I didn't know where that was. So I looked at the guys who were from British Columbia and they didn't know where it was either. So that's when I knew I was in trouble. It's like, I didn't get the nice city that I wanted to. So I was in a northern town called, a place called New Hazelton. We actually had like several different communities. It probably wasn't the best place for a young single guy to live. In that there wasn't a lot of social opportunities. It's very isolated. But as far as work-wise, it was fantastic. It was a great place to start because I was forced to do everything by myself. There was no, experienced detectives that are going to swoop in and take my file for me. There was no, not a ton of backup available. Like if there's 2 or 3 of us working, that was a lot. So you learn to work on your own, and it produced a lot of skills I was able to rely on later. That's called a limited duration post. I mean, they're only going to leave you there for so long. So I was actually only there for 2.5 years. And then I transferred down to a place called Vernon, which is in the interior, which is kind of where I had wanted to go originally. And I think I was there. I kind of lose track of the time. So I worked patrol there for a little bit. And then I really liked to do drug section. So at the time, we had a big problem with marijuana grow-ops and organized crime rings setting up. It was terrible. They would take these new immigrants who had no language skills, no employment capabilities, opportunities. They would use them as a straw man to purchase a house, and then they would set the house up with a grow up and sort of force these people who had no other options to operate this grow up. It would cause tons of property damage. We'd always get fires. People would always, get killed in these fires, like these family members, because the electrical wasn't done right, et cetera, et cetera. So that was sort of one of my real niches, was stringing together the organized crime aspect, because you can find like the trail, the breadcrumbs. It was really interesting of like, you find one house and then that leads you to their cousin and then that leads you to this. And then you find a vehicle parked over there. And then what we'd do is we'd wait until because we don't do this anymore, I'll tell you, because they're just not a thing anymore. We'd wait until they were doing their crop off. So all their friends would come help trim the plants, and you get everyone's license plates, and then you just and they all had them too. Right. So, I kind of, that's how I was really getting introduced into drug work. From there was a fairly easy step over to major crime. So I did a lot of major crime work. So a lot of kidnappings. I spent over a year doing child sex offenses, like just investigating, which we call child pornography, although that's the wrong word for it. It's what people know it as, but it's, images of child abuse. And a few serial child molesters, which was very rewarding work, but I don't know if it's something I would have wanted to do for a long time. I sort of tumbled into writing a lot of search warrants. So after major crime, I started a search warrant section where it's all I did was write search warrants. And then it was during that time I decided to go to law school because I kind of just got the law bug. And then following law school, I sort of really wanted to scratch that itch of going to a full-time emergency response team. I'd done it part-time in those smaller places. There's a part-time team, but down in the big city, I was in Surrey by then. It's it's the show, right? It's full-time. They're super busy. And that's what I wanted to go do. So that's what I did. So I did that for 5 years on the team. And then that's when I took my promotion to, they call it the white shirt, as an inspector, did a few policy jobs. And then when the position came open as OIC, I slid back and took over the team.
Okay. Is there like a certain amount of years experience like required for something like that? Or is it more based on work ethic? Like, how do you get selected for that position?
I don't think anyone else wanted it. It's funny because to me, it's like the dream job. But you got to think it's a high exposure job, right? Mm-hmm. So first of all, you're managing, 60 high performance, but high expectation, strong personalities. So you have significant managerial challenges, right? I wouldn't want it any other way, but to think if you have a team of high performers that it's going to be super simple, it's not. It's actually harder in a lot of ways. So you have that 200 times a year, your team is deploying out onto files where you could have catastrophic downside impacts. So for an officer who, especially if someone wants to be upwardly mobile, it's like you could run 199 of those 200 files perfectly. No one's going to remember. They're going to remember the one that blew up in your face and everything went wrong, because we don't control all the variables in our environment. These things go wrong sometimes. So it actually wasn't that hard to. It's not like there was a big long list. I had to it was a kumite to see who could win out and get this job. In fact, I'm a little less than 2 years from retirement now. I'm trying to find a replacement that we can start grooming. And it's hard to actually find people who want that high pressure, high exposure job.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask later kind of what's the time frame that somebody would stay in your position? Like I know traditional retirement, 60, 65, you're saying you're looking at retirement in 2 years. I mean, are you completely out and you're going to be done just relaxing at that point? Or what's the regular situation for somebody in your position?
Yeah. So in policing in general, our pensions, we have a defined benefit pension plan. I mean, I know you guys are all about pensions and that stuff.
We do.
And so it's after 25 years, you can retire without penalty, and it's 50% of your best five. So it's pretty, that's a good pension plan. A lot of police officers, particularly RCMP, if you've had a dynamic career, you probably have a Veterans Affairs pension as well. Maybe you've got some hearing loss, or that time you blew your knee or something like that. So that's you can rely on that income as well. So generally, you see 25 years. A lot of people are leaving. You can run out the clock to 35 years service if you want, but you're only accruing 2% extra per year, and you're essentially working for half price, because you could leave and make 50%. Or you can stay and make 100%. So a lot of people leave and they transition those skills to something else. I don't know. I can't say for sure. I might be one of those guys who says he's going to leave and then never actually leaves. But I'm really curious how the skills that I've learned in my current job would translate into the private sector or translate into some other endeavor. I've got to think they're valuable, but I just don't know what that looks like. And I don't know that environment. So that's kind of what I'm going to try to dip my toe into a little bit and do a little reconnaissance over the next couple of years.
Right. Kevin, you touched on, the highly stressful position and the one you're in now and the one you try to replace in the next couple of years. How does one hold that position, yours and or any of your team? There's days we wake up and we're stressed out because of our world and for a bunch of different reasons. And if I compare it to those who are serving, it seems pretty minimal. And like, what the heck are we worried about when you guys are out protecting us? And also, I forgot to mention, thank you for serving and all of your team and anyone you've come in contact with. We appreciate that. But I guess my question is, how do highly trained officers handle all these stressful situations? What are some of the tactics that you learn or you teach your team or you constantly remind yourself and them to ensure that, hey, we can get through this?
Yeah, I think, I suppose what our advantage is we have, so first of all, let's set the stage here. Like, what environment are we talking about? I kind of mentioned earlier, asymmetrical downside impact environment. So a lot of people think that, you're talking about managing risk or managing danger. Managing risk is like flipping a coin, right? It's like we know the variables, it's 50-50. We're trying to maximize the reward and minimize the consequence if something goes down. Like that's how we're taught to make decisions. I know in our environment, it's completely different. I suspect it's different in businesses as well. So in my environment, it's like, listen, if we get a hostage taking call, I think we did, like in December, we actually had 2 different ones, which is pretty rare. If that goes right, it's like, cool, we get to do that same call again in a few weeks. If it goes wrong, someone's going to die. It might be the victim, might be us. Even if it goes, even if we accomplish our mission and rescue the hostage or the victim, it's like, there might be a use of force against the bad guy. So if things go bad, they go really bad. If things go well, it's like, great, you get to do that call tomorrow. It's asymmetrical downside risk. So you can't apply the same strategies that I think we've been all taught, like, oh, weigh your pros and cons, do out your list, assess this, and then plan that. It doesn't work. Because here's the other thing is you're trying to make these decisions under time compression. You never have as much time as you want. You don't control all the variables. We say the bad guy gets a vote, but imagine in business, it's like market conditions are outside of your sphere of influence. You never have complete information, right? So it's like you said, like waking up and facing that environment every day is very difficult. So for me, it's, the advantage is that we get to iterate 230 times a year about what went wrong, right, and what went wrong. So we do a lot of debriefing, we do a lot of analysis, and we also get to train things. So we're lucky, we've got a very fast feedback loop. We're able to establish what works well and then what doesn't work well, and then we're able to change it, and we're able to iterate that 200 times a year. I suppose that comes at a cost, though, or there's a difficulty there. And it's like you have to be willing to be flexible and to be malleable, and realize that just because here's the other thing is sometimes it's like, hey guys, we accomplished the mission, we rescued the hostage. Yeah, we actually got lucky. It wasn't because we're good, it's because we're lucky. And that's an easy mistake. It's easy to conflate luck with skill. Particularly if you're looking through some rose-colored glasses that you want to feel like hey, we're a fancy high-performance team. It's like, no, man, we messed that up. Or, yeah, we're successful, and it was because we did a good job. But you know what? Our comms were a bit sloppy. We were talking too much on the radio. Our timings were off. We had 2 elements out of place at the wrong time. But we got lucky, and those things didn't matter. But it wasn't, high fives and belly bumps all around. Nick, I didn't even answer your question, and I got totally off topic. Where do you want to take that?
I think like I was listening to say, okay, what is it that we could do in business or business owners could do? So we don't necessarily coach business owners at this point, but we deal with them and things come up. And the debrief and the reviewing what you've done, and you think of the Einstein quote, if you've done the same thing over and over, expecting different results, we're insane, So I think that's often overlooked, the ability to prep, go into a situation, complete the task, then come back out and go, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? I appreciate that structure that you have, in which us as business owners, sometimes we're all over the place. Or not to say everyone is, but having that, this process for this sales call, for this client interaction to ensure that we're doing what we should be doing, we're improving on it each time, or identifying, also, like you said, there are times when you get lucky. And perhaps if you're not doing these debriefs or reviewing that situation, you might be holding your head a little too high when realizing just something happened to land on your lap, and perhaps it wasn't due to the activity you've created. I see the commonalities there. As we go back to stressful situations, though, what are some of the tactics in that, and this might be very, very simple, but I don't think everyone knows about these, perhaps like just even a breathing exercise during a situation, or do I even have time to do that if I'm in your position when, everything, noise, lights, fast moving, all the things. How can I calm down? Like you said about comms, I'm not yelling and screaming on the radio. I'm being calm, and So, are there some tactics that exist to ensure that, or is it chaotic?
So there definitely is. It's a skill. So staying calm is a skill. It's something that can be trained and nurtured, 100%. There's 2 things as a leader that are contagious. One is panic, and one is calmness. So one thing we always try to do is, that's the first thing, is that you can actually infect others with either panic or calmness. There's no question. Another good tool that I like to do is first of all, expect it to feel awful, right? Like these are high pressure things. It's not going to feel good. If you're waiting for it to feel good before you make your decision or before you take action, you're going to be too slow and you'll never actually take action. And people expect that. It's like, well, if I had everything set up properly and if I knew enough about the scenario, then when I pulled the trigger on this project, it would feel easy. It's not. It's never going to feel easy. Or I think any problem worth engaging on is not going to feel easy. If it felt easy and good, well, anyone could do that. Like, those aren't interesting problems to engage with. So expect that you're going to feel bad about it. Like, it's not going to feel comfortable. And that's what you're looking for, because it means you haven't fallen victim to over collecting information. It means you haven't fallen victim to just expecting the answer to tumble out. That's a good thing. The second thing is understand that your emotions are going to bleed into others. The third thing is fake it, man. This is my trick. And the Spartans used to do this. They used to believe that someone's emotions are what their facial expressions created emotions, not the other way around. Right? So if you go into it's like if you start smiling, you're going to improve your happiness. It's biologically impossible not to. So if you're going into a scenario where you're at risk of being elevated in your response, and there's a lot of problems with being overly elevated. We'll talk about that in a second, but sometimes being elevated is a good thing, but there's a sweet spot we're going to look for. But it's like, one thing I do is I pretend to be bored. And I'm pretending. So if I'll get on the radio, I'll try to sound bored, and then I won't sound like a chipmunk. That's what I'm going for. So fake it till you make it is actually a completely legitimate strategy. But let's talk about where you want to be on that elevation scale, right? So we call it from code white to code black, right? So in condition white, it's like nothing's going on. You're asleep. Like, you're not aware of your surroundings at all. You can go up to yellow, where it's like, now you're awake and aware, but you're really not paying that much attention. When you hit orange, now you're in the dark alley at night, or the parking lot you're unfamiliar with. You're looking around and you're paying attention. You can keep pushing that into red. Now there's a suspicious guy coming towards you. Now you're really on high alert. Things are happening. Your pulse rate's increasing. Your respiration's increasing. When you get into condition black, it's when he's attacking you and you're completely in panic mode. A lot of bad things start happening in code black. It looks like you are looking through a straw. I think, how about this? If a lot of people, the first time they try to call 911 because, there's been a car accident or a family member's had a medical emergency, they can't see the numbers or they can't dial the numbers. Why is that? It's because their small muscle control has completely evaporated. Their visual acuity has evaporated. Oftentimes you won't hear, well, I'll tell you this. I've been in a house where we had a shooting, like shooting with the bad guy. There was other explosions going on because another team was breaching another door to go rescue another hostage 5 feet away from me. Didn't hear it. Didn't hear multiple shotgun blasts as they disabled this lock 5 feet from me. Why? Because I was experiencing auditory exclusion. So there's certain physiological things that are going to happen to your body when you start hitting those stress response. If you go too high, things start shutting down and you start getting into pure instinctual reaction. We don't want to be in instinctual reaction. We want to be more into intuitive reaction and deliberate reaction, right? We can categorize our reactions into different things. There's pros and cons to each. My instincts are very quick, right? If my wife is hiding around the corner and she jumps out at me and scares me, she's going to get an instinctual reaction. It's super fast, but there's no conscious thought to it, right? Versus, if you get a different scenario, we've got all the time in the world to plan. Well, now you're getting higher up into you're getting out of your reptile brain and into your higher mammal brain. You're going to make more deliberate decisions, but they're going to be slower. So I guess one of the things, we talk about, expect it to not feel comfortable. Talk about it, fake it till you make it. Understand it's contagious. And the other thing is situate yourself so that your instinctual reaction are not going to be counteractive to what you're already doing. And I'll give you an example that you'll have to translate into your own purposes because I can't do it for you. But shooting platform. Let's say I'm clearing a house, and I've got my carbine up and I'm clearing corners and I'm looking for bad guy, and all of a sudden bad guy's there and he shoots at me. I am going to flinch. I don't care who you are, or how trained you are, you're going to flinch. So one thing we do is, well, how about we make our shooting platform consistent with that? So our shooting position consistent with that flinch response. So it's a little bit hunched over, right? So now I'm not, you really can't train yourself out of instinct. You can condition yourself a little bit, but you need to know what your red flags are and where those landmines are, so that when you get into that position, you're not going to be trying to counteract your instinct. I don't know if that's of any help at all, or if that can be translated to your purposes. I'm not sure.
That's really neat. Like,
That's really cool.
I'm sure if I had a few minutes, I could create a bunch of crossovers into our world. But it just keeps coming back, and again, for the audience, trying to connect this to business, even though I just rather listen to you talk. It's the preparation, it's the training, and that's really what it seems to me, the analysis of these certain situations and how can we continually improve as a team. So from a business perspective, as a business leader, I can see that, we debrief on, the calls. Again, if I made a call to a client or a prospective client, and what went right, what went wrong, what are things that I can say to better, have a client open up to us so we can better serve them. All of those types of things. It doesn't come without extensive training and understanding of, I think, our own psychology and that of the people we're working with. So, awesome, I guess. Yeah. Are there some other techniques for leadership that you've experienced or that you use in policing that you think, could be used in the business world, or some of those intersections, as you've said, this is something you want to explore in the next couple of years of how you can use these skills? And I'm sure you've already got ideas running through your mind. So, do you mind sharing a few of those with us now?
Yeah, sure. So what I can share is the problems that I've had when I'm, faced with these circumstances that I know could go really bad, and I don't have lots of time, and I don't have control of the variables, and I don't know all the information. And I've seen the errors in my own decision-making at times and how that's played out. We also have, I call it, it's almost like a decision-making laboratory. So we teach an incident commanders course at the Canadian Police College. So a few times a year we get, it's a class of 16 people come through, and we put them through 2 weeks of training and scenarios, essentially of how to make decisions in these difficult circumstances. And we see all sorts of very similar behaviors crop up that are suboptimal, I would say. So maybe we can hit a few of those and then
Sure.
and see where that goes. So I'll tell you one of the things that we see a lot of, and certainly I fall victim of this, is over collecting information. So, you'll be presented with a scenario and you'll just want to know more and more and more about it. And why is that? Like, why do we all fall victim to this analysis paralysis, which is such an overused term. I hate it, but let's look a little deeper into it, right? Why do we get sucked into that trap? And I think there's essentially two reasons. One is it feels good, right? It feels like we're doing something. It feels like we are attacking the problem because we're busy, right? But we're not actually attacking the problem. We're just observing the problem. And I've always found that there is a very dramatic reduction in return on investment. Like I get that diminishing return very quickly on collecting information passively. And it's not until I kind of engage in the problem a little bit, like just dip my toe into it, that I start getting more feedback that opens up different vantage points to observe that problem in a different way. But you know what I mean? Like when you're I don't know how you guys do it. If you're analyzing a market, you're doing something, it's like, man, you just want it. If you're busy, well, I'm busy solving the problem. It's like, man, you ain't solving nothing. Like you're observing the problem. But why is it so? And here's the other thing. Why else do we over collect information? Is because we expect that feeling of discomfort to go away, right? So we have we have a decision. It's not a decision making form. It's a command and control model called SMEAC. So we organize everything into situation, mission, execution, administration, and command and control communication, right? And every bit of information or action, you're trying to put it into one of those 5 categories. And what I see all the time, these new candidates, who are just learning the job, do is they'll look up at their SMEAC board when they get asked a hard question, right? It's like, bro, the answer ain't on the board. Like if we could just collect information and then answers would tumble out, I would replace you with a spreadsheet And that's all I would do is I would just hire a data entry clerk to put in the data and the right answer would pop out. But at some point, we just need human decision making, and it's never going to feel good. So I'd say, like those are kind of two of the big problems we see. And I see this bleeding over, not just in operations, but also in administration. So as a boss, I try really hard not to over collect information. I say there's two categories of information that are worth collecting and sharing. The first is decision information that is going to be used to inform a decision. So how many times have we had, do we force someone to write a report or put in some stats or something, and you're like, cool, like, well, what are you doing? What decision are you trying to make with this information? And there isn't one, right? So I'll give you an example. We were trying to decide how to best deploy our truck fleet. Our fleet's very expensive. We spend a lot, like maybe 7% of our annual budget on our fleet, vehicle fit up, maintenance, fuel, etc. So it's a big expense. How do we want to deploy that fleet? Do I want to spend more on trucks and have each guy with their own truck, or do I want to partner trucks up? Because the guys are on call a lot. We've got 12,000 square kilometer response area. Like, it's just massive, et cetera, et cetera. The tendency is to be like, oh, let's collect response times. Okay, you guys are paired up. You guys are single. Let's compare your response times. And so every call from now on, I want your response times. That feels good. It gives me an illusion of control that I have this information. But it's fake. It's like, unless I'm trying to make a decision of how am I going to deploy my fleet, we rapidly lose the value of that. So we collected it for 3 months, made our decision. We don't collect it anymore. We can go back and recollect it if we need, but we don't want to over collect that information. So unless you're making decisions, so I always ask when I'm going to ask someone to do some report, what decision am I making off this? The other thing I try to define is, what is my decision criteria? So first of all, am I the decision maker? Second, what is my decision criteria? Like, if my response time is going to be, and sometimes you don't even know, but you can kind of hash it out. It's like, okay, if I realize a 30% improvement in my response time, then that's going to be worth a 20% improvement or increase in my vehicle budget. Something like that. But if I don't know what I'm trying to decide, I'm going to get that data and I'm probably not going to know what I'm going to do with it. Or I'm just going to be whimsical about my decision, in which case it was pretty random. I might as well have just, guess to begin with. Like, why did I bother collecting the data? So that's the first thing. If you're not going to make information, or if you're not going to make a decision, why collect the information? The asterisk to that is, I love sharing information if it builds relationships. So it's like, my partners might not be making decisions off this. So here's an example. Every deployment we do, I do up a briefing note. It takes about 10 minutes of time. Hey, here's the call. Here's the value we brought to the call. Here's the capabilities we brought to bear. And then here was the outcome. I share it far wider than I need to. I send it to all the deputy chiefs that we serve, of the agencies we serve. I send it to my senior management. I send it to my partner teams. I send it to my neighboring teams. Why? They don't need to know that information. But they're not making any decision on it, but it helps build our relationship. They now feel connected to me. And particularly when I send it to my boss, now they stop asking me so many questions because they feel informed beforehand. So can I tell you a trick that we use actually sometimes?
Go for it.
Okay, so one of the workarounds to getting around collecting too much information is asking your team, is to differentiate between permission and intentions. So at the start of a mission, I'll say, hey guys, here's the situation. We've got, a guy, he's kidnapped his 2 kids. He's sending threatening texts to his ex-wife that, if he can't have the kids full time, no one's going to have them, et cetera, et cetera. They don't know the police are outside their house. Whatever situation you want to, here's the situation. Here's our mission. So our mission is to rescue those kids and arrest the bad guy. And then I'll give them the commander's intent. Guys, at this point in the call, it's really important we get negotiations up and running while you guys start building your tactical plans. Something like that. Now, if my officers need to ask me for permission for everything they need to do, we're going to be really, really slow. So my rule is, if it's consistent with the mission and consistent with the commander's intent, brief me on your intentions, right? So I'll have one of the containment elements. Okay, we're going back, to the backyard and make sure the guy can't leave. They're not saying, can we go to the backyard? Hey, Charlie Elman's deploying to the rear. Perfect. That's all I need to know. Now, why do I want to know what their intentions are? Because we are trying to deconflict multiple units moving in a certain space. And we want to make sure that one group isn't doing something that's going to be counterproductive to the other group. In our world, the most egregious example of counterproductive activity would be if we position two elements so that they're, facing each other and have, we call it a blue on blue scenario, right? Bad guy comes out. Now we've got two police officers pointing guns at each other with bad guy in the middle. Not good. But, administratively, if I got a guy researching a new firearms platform and I got another guy researching, a different one, it's like they're working at cross purposes. So that's why it's important to brief intentions so that you, as a commander, you can understand the field that you're working in and know where everyone is. The exception to that is when do they have to ask for permission? They have to ask for permission if it's contrary to the commander's intent. Now, sometimes that's exactly what I want them to do because I don't have all the situational awareness that they do. I don't see all the facts, and all of a sudden they'll say, "Hey, we want to do the next, we want to." I don't want to get too much into tactics, but we want to do this next thing, and it's going to have such a profound impact on the trajectory of the call that they need to ask for permission for it. So we really differentiate or stipulate when you need to ask for permission, and otherwise you need to brief your intentions. We don't want people to be working in silos. You can't have a functioning team with that.
That's crazy. I'm sure you have a bunch of questions that you want to ask right now, Nick, but I got a question just because it's just been on my mind, and you literally live like a real life video game. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what are your thoughts on I guess we'll call it the media, the video games, the movies, everything that's very similar to what you do. What are your thoughts on it? Do you think it's cool, or do you think it's exploitive?
Okay. So I love it. I think it's cool, but it's nothing like real life. My job. So here's the thing. Nobody can thrive in a high risk environment over a long period of time. It is impossible. You can survive it, but you cannot thrive it. And eventually, your number's going to go up. It's like playing in a casino where you can break even or go bust, but you're never going to win the jackpot, right? Go to that casino enough, you're going to lose big time. It's just the way it's going to be. So you can't thrive in a high risk environment. So my job is to take environments that are high hazard and make them boring, man. I want these calls to be boring. If I don't, and that's another thing. So, and how can you make that boring? Well, first of all, we've trained it lots. So it's not our first time being in that situation. So the best thing you can ever have is when your officers turn around and it was a real life scenario and they're like, man, that was just like training. That is the perfect answer that you want to hear. It's not the first time there. When it's not your first time in a scenario, you're not going to panic as much, right? So we do a lot of things. Now, here's the thing. We do a lot of what's called tabletop exercises. So you'll sit down and you'll give the guys a scenario. Hey, Nick and Nate, we're going to, here's the call we've got. We've got a guy who's called in and said his wife's calling in saying her ex is texting her that he has the kids and he's going to kill them and himself. He's at this house. What's our priorities here? And we're just going to talk through that scenario. Well, that's important. We're going to lay down some neural pathways so that when that call actually happens tomorrow or some variance of it, we're not solving those problems for the first time. Tabletop training is phenomenal. I feel like there's probably a lot of business applications where you could do tabletop scenarios. It costs nothing but your time, and then it'll just get the juices flowing. And then you'll go home and you're like, oh, we didn't think of this or we didn't think of that. So yes, we try to do a lot of training. I forgot what we're talking about. Sorry.
It was just fresh on my mind. I just watched a movie kind of for the SWAT team, Sicario, and it's about the cartel and everything. So I was just like, it was just so fresh on my mind. I had to ask it.
Okay, so yes, I love those movies. I think they're awesome. I do try to make things boring. Look, you can't always make it boring. Like that's impossible. When the action scene is going down, bro, it's going down. It's for real. At this point in my career, I'm in the command post, so it's more just like give them the go ahead to launch, and then just kind of waiting. And I have a game where I watch my pulse rate and I try to keep it as low as possible. It's impossible, but that's what we try to do. One of my team leaders, he actually does the same when he's in meetings. He'll train himself to keep his pulse rate down. So it's really interesting. We develop these strategies just to get out of our reptile brain as much as possible and up into our higher levels of thinking. But yeah, man, I love the movies. Very much not true or not, but we get little snippets of legit excitement, I suppose.
Cool. Yeah, I was just curious.
What are some of those games? How do you control your breathing? Just out of curiosity, reduce your pulse rate.
So just box breathing,
Yeah.
So it's pretty standard stuff. And then the other thing is just, you have to realize, like, a lot of times anxiety, I feel, for me anyway, is caused by things I have not identified. They're the unknowns. So how can I drag things from the shadows into the light and put a name on them? It's like, if I act, and this is actually a very valuable way, we call it a pre-mortem, of pre-identifying failure points. So we might have an operation. Let's say let's say we've got a gun trafficker. We know he's armed absolutely to the teeth at a commercial play. He's at a commercial building. Well, we need to devise a plan to arrest him in such a way that we're not going to get in a huge shootout with the guy who, has as many guns as we do, right? Which is not good. You're going to feel nervous going into that scenario. So you need to, the way you get out of those nerves is say, okay, how can this scenario fail? How can this operation fail? And we actually talk about it with you guys. Let's say one of our officers got shot and killed on this file. What's the most likely way it would happen? That's much easier question to answer than what's the worst thing that could happen on this file. Like, that's a nebulous, weird answer. You want to name something. And when you name things, now you're going to be able to identify your contributors to failure better. And then you're going to be able to control those contributors to failure, or those variables. And then you're going to feel better. Here's the thing we do on selection. It's a great interview question, is when you're doing reference checks. If you call someone for a reference check, like, I rate this guy on a scale of 1 to 10, they're going to say 7 or 8, right? Like, that's just the answer you're going to get. If you say, if I were to call you in 6 months and say this person didn't work out, what do you think the most likely reason for that failure would be? Now you're going to get a real answer. Oh, yeah, likes to run his mouth a bunch. He's a super high performer, but man, oh man, really strong personality, kind of skates with his elbows up and bowls people over with his opinions, kind of thing. Now you're, he's been working on it, but he's not quite there yet. You're going to get a much more tangible answer. So how do you control nerves? I feel like you take it from intangible concerns into tangible actions that you can take and prevent. You can never control all the variables, but you can do a better job than just being nebulously nervous.
Awesome. What do you think makes a good leader, Kevin? And how do you identify them?
So this is interesting. When I took over the unit, I was terrible at it. Like, legit terrible. I assumed, like, hey, I was on the team before as an NCO. I know what these guys need. I know all their tricks, and I'm, a new sheriff in town. I'm going to go solve some things, kind of thing. And it blew up in my face. So I actually had to realize that I wasn't inherently as good at leadership as I thought. Like, I thought, there's some things I do very well. Like, so my personality, I'm very good at making decisions that are stressful and that I know have downside consequence. I'm not one of those guys that just dithers and puts decisions off. I don't do that. I'm very strong in that area. I'm very strong in just getting things done. I am not strong, or was not strong, in dealing with people and I suppose understanding my role as a leader. And I think there's I could probably give you 20 different things that I used to do badly. Boy, wouldn't even know where to start. I don't even know where to start. What mistake do you want to hear that I've made? And I will gladly tell you.
I don't know. I think, and identifying leaders and what their roles are is, it comes down to understanding your people. So what tactics do you have as a leader to better get to know your team, to find out perhaps what buttons to push to get them moving or calm them down, these types of things?
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest tool I've been able to leverage on that is letting go of, I call it the illusion of control, right? So if you have to come to me and ask me for everything, it makes me feel like I have control, but in fact, I don't. I'll give you an operational example of this. So let's say we're going to go do a search warrant on a drug house, and we're going to roll up, and you guys are on the assault team. You surround the house, and we're going to call the guy out, right, on our loud hailer. and you see that there's some surveillance cameras pointing at you and they're compromising your position. What we used to do on the team is you would have to radio back to me, hey, command post, we've got surveillance cameras here. Can we knock them out we've got essentially, I'll say rubber bullets for lack of a better word, just because people understand, but people will cringe if they hear this. Like, that's not what they're called. Whatever. Rubber bullets. Okay. They're just like sponge rounds that we shoot and they break things. Okay. Okay. So that makes me feel like I'm in control of the operation. I say, yes, Nick, you can do that, or no, Nick, you can't. Right. What am I basing my decision on? I'm at the command post. I can't see the house. I can't see the surveillance cameras. I can't see where you are. I can't see where the other elements are, what it's compromising. Why do I feel the need to make that decision and control you like a chess piece, right? It's an illusion of control. And if I am going to make the decision, what am I basing it on? Who has better situational awareness, me or you? So I think this is one of the hardest things as a leader is realize that we always say the decisions should be made by the people who have the appropriate training to make the decisions, and if they have sufficient situational awareness of the situation. Without those two things, you're not making good decisions. But it's easy as a boss, it's easier emotionally for me to hold that on than to give it to you. So that little bit of decentralized command is great. Now, the key, I think, to executing decentralized command on a team is to match authority and responsibility. So it's one thing for me to say, Nick, you are the team leader, you are responsible for the proper outcome of this operation. But if I don't give you the authority to carry that out, I'm just going to create all sorts of frustration for you. And there's actually, we can actually like break it down into different quadrants of like, if I give you low authority and low responsibility, what am I telling you? I'm telling you that you're completely irrelevant, right? And you're just going and you're going to be completely disenfranchised. If I say, hey, you have really high responsibility, but you have to come to ask me for anything, I'm just going to create frustration. You're going to have no autonomy, right? If I give you, or if I retain all of the authority, but I have no responsibility. So everything is your fault if it goes wrong, Nate. But if it goes great, if it goes well, like I still retain all authority. Well, that's a dictatorship, right? That's authoritarianism. No, you're not going to want to work there. It's only when we match high authority and high responsibility that we actually create autonomy and purpose. And so I think one of the hardest things as a leader is driving yourself towards that high authority, high responsibility. So you can have really high expectations of your team, but you have to give them the authority to meet those expectations. It's only when you do those two things together, I think, that you're going to get real high performance over the long term that's sustainable.
Incredible. Awesome.
So I guess you said, you talked briefly about, I guess, what makes a good officer in terms of the ones that can make decisions on their own when they're allowed to, rather than constantly coming back and asking you for permission for everything. So what are some other good characteristics of an officer that would stand out to you, that would be considered, I guess, we'll call it a good officer?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, one of the things that I really struggled with is I didn't understand the impact I had on others, right? So I'm a pretty forceful personality, kind of loud. I'm not quiet. And I didn't realize, it's called my T-Rex leadership theory, right? So like a T-Rex, they try to whisper and it comes out as a roar. So, I don't have the luxury anymore of kind of taking good-natured jabs at guys on the team. I wish I could. There's too much risk that it's going to be interpreted as a criticism, right? So I have to be very, very careful with what I say and how I say it. Now, look, I'm not saying there's I never tell jokes. I'm saying I have to be careful about it. And I learned that the hard way. We had a call, actually, it was last Christmas, not this Christmas. Some kid didn't. I'm not even exaggerating this. He didn't get as much mashed potatoes as he wanted, so he flipped the Christmas table, stabbed his mom, and barricaded in his room. And it's a 15-year-old kid with mental health issues, right? So now we've got to go get him out. We don't want to compress time and space, so there's we want to negotiate him out, et cetera, et cetera. One of the guys, it's Christmas, we're all on call. He wasn't paying close enough to his attention to his phone, and he showed up a bit late to the call. It was totally fine. It made zero impact on the call because it was just, we're dealing with a compressed environment. So it was no big deal. And he felt terrible, and he's one of the highest performers on the team. And I kind of teased him a little on it. And I teased him about it in front of others. And I saw the look on his face, and I realized, man, that was the wrong move. It wasn't. So in my mind, I'm just Kevin. I used to be one of the guys, not one of the guys anymore. Sorry. I don't have that luxury anymore. So what I say, it just has more impact, right? The other thing I say is like, it's easy for me to turn quickly, right? So I've got, I'm the T-Rex, I turn quickly. We're working on one project, and then all of a sudden it ceases to be the priority, or I decide that we're going to go in another direction. I turn quickly. I don't realize that I've got this big tail behind me that just sweeps behind me and just pulls over all the work that everyone did. And it disrespects them, and it tells them that it's not valuable. So I have to be very careful and methodical about how we determine priorities and the pace at which we make change. So I always say there's 3 things I have to worry about when I'm talking to people or initiating change: tact, timing, and tempo. So tact is like, how am I trying to initiate the change? Because oftentimes when you say to someone, hey, Nathan, we want to do it, I know you've been doing it this way, we want to do it that way instead, you will often interpret that as a criticism, right? So I have to have a better tact for that. Hey, Nathan, here's our objective. Do you think there's any way we can achieve that in a better way? You probably got all kinds of ideas. You probably don't need me telling you your job, to be honest. But at some point I might say, hey, Nathan, here's our new objective. Here's the why. So it's all about tact. How am I going to approach this? The next one is timing. I fail at this all the time because I'm an impatient person. I like to go quickly. It's one of my strengths, also one of my weaknesses. So sometimes if I try to push too many changes too quickly, it just inundates people. They feel untethered from their environment. They feel like they don't have control. So I have to really, that'd be more tempo. Like how quickly are these changes? And the other thing is timing. A little while ago, I still make these mistakes. I sent someone I wanted something, and it could have waited until Monday. I sent the email Friday afternoon, and it just sort of totally annoyed this guy. But for me, I was like, I just want to get this off my desk. I just want to get this thing done so I can get on to the next thing. I wasn't paying attention to timing, and I mistimed it. And because of that, it interfered with us attaining our objective because it got someone's back up. So yeah, those are, the whispers come out as a roar. The tail just bowls people over. And the other thing is that I'll just do it for myself. I say I have T-Rex arms. I think I can handle things myself, but I've got these little arms. And when I try to do something, I always just kind of screw it up. Because and sometimes, it's like, I'm just Kevin and I'm helping. I'm not. It's like, does the boss think I'm not able to do this job? Like, it can be misinterpreted as something else. And there's ways around these things. I'm not saying I just sit in my office and don't do anything. I'm a big fan of Jocko Willink, and one of the things he says is, pick brass, like no job is above you. And that is absolutely true. But I do think you need to be careful with how you do it so that you're not offending people, because you're not in your head, you're just you, right? But the new guy who comes on the team, like, it's the inspector and it's a big deal. And that never computes to me. It doesn't make sense because I'm still just Kevin. I guess that's just not reality. So I think that's important, is to, as you rise the ranks, to realize, man, your job has changed.
Cool. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. That's quite vulnerable of you to share your journey and how you felt, but it's pretty awesome to hear. I think a lot have learned from that. Speaking of Jocko, I collected that we were both fans of him. So I wrote down a quote from his book, Discipline Equals Freedom, the Field Manual. And I just want to read it to you, and maybe we can riff on that for a minute. And I know we're probably getting tight for time for you, so we'll let you go after that. Is that all right?
I got tons of time, but yeah, okay. Absolutely. You tell me.
Awesome. So he says, question yourself every day. Ask yourself, who am I? What have I learned? What have I created? What forward progress have I made? Who have I helped? What am I doing to improve myself today? To get better, faster, stronger, healthier, and smarter. Not sure if you've read that book or heard that quote, but just curious to see what your thoughts are on that, Kevin.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the need to be humble, right? Like, we have a saying on our team. Well, we used to have a saying, it was like, you're only as good as your last call. And we thought that was a great saying because it's like we talk about performance on demand. It doesn't matter how good you think you are, how high speed your training is. If you can't perform on demand, that's where it matters. So we changed our, you're only as good as your last call to you're only as good as your next call. Your past performance is largely irrelevant. It's built a foundation for you. You want it to be good, but you could, you could be the team that's won the World Series 10 years in a row. It's not going to help you win the next World Series. Your performance on that day is going to be what's going to help you win that game. So I think it really takes, and it's hard to do that, exercising that humility of, what do we need to do better? And I'll tell you the trick we use on our team, or the expectation we have on debriefs is, when we sit down after a file, we do it every time, every file, no matter how well it's gone or no matter how poorly it's gone. And we will sit down and we'll say, first of all, did we accomplish the mission? And if we say yes, we don't just stop. We say, okay, what could we have done better? And we go around, and each person is expected to identify what they could have done differently. It's very important that we're not like, Nathan, you didn't get your containment locked down quick enough. And Nick, your sniper position was compromised because you didn't bother to camp, whatever. We don't point fingers. Sometimes we can say, hey, I was on the entry team, but I'm not sure, from when I came out, where was the containment element? Was that the best spot? So we do need to question things, but we try not to accuse things because the expectation is that you own it yourself proactively. So we have that. We also have a non-punitive way of recognizing errors. So we have to realize that, even in the team of the highest performers, there's human fallibility in every equation, and people are going to fail. So you need to create a way that people can own up to their mistakes where it actually earns them social capital. It doesn't detract from their social capital. So in our mind, everyone knows if Nathan didn't get his containment element locked down quick enough, we all know. And if he doesn't come, cough it up, someone might gently point it out to him, but it's like, oh, wait a second, and he'll probably have someone talk to him later about it and about, hey, you need to own these things because otherwise it's going to be uncomfortable for everyone. So how do you create a way that if Nathan does a little bigger oopsie, he can atone for it? And we call it dilly bars. So if someone does something kind of a little higher on the scale of mistake, not to an actual performance problem, they've got to buy dilly bars for the team. And it goes a little. There's a few other penance items that we have, and it's all good natured, and it's all a way for you to create an environment that is open to say, hey guys, that's on me. I won't do that again. And I find inevitably the highest performers on the team are always the one who take the most ownership over the mistakes. In fact, it's a big, in my mind, red flag when I start seeing guys turn into the gray man, where they never really have anything to say, and they're kind of always just there. It's like that's probably or maybe an indicator of personality, which is fine. We have all kinds of personalities, but sometimes it can also be an indicator of someone just getting into the average performance and sort of starting to hide errors, and that's something we want to pay more attention to.
Incredible, Kevin. I could listen to you all day, man. I think your second career is available if you wanted to, which is, I don't want to give it, probably leadership consulting. I'm sure business owners would love to hear what you have to say. You have so many great stories, analogies. I think they're all applicable to many different industries, and you can definitely grab attention. So this has been awesome. Before we sign off, with respect to time, I'm just curious, is there one question that you wish people would ask you more often, or that have never asked you?
Well, not that I can think of now, but
fair enough. No, that's awesome. Well, if not, then is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with? You've shared again so many great stories, analogies, ideas on leadership and growth and all of these types of things. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Well, there is. And it's something you and I spoke with just kind of in our little pre-brief. Is you talked quickly about mental toughness.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of I have a thought on that. So I've had the luxury of interacting with, some of the top teams in North America and in Europe. And I've seen some super tough dudes, like just crazy tough, squared away people, and I've discovered their secret. I don't know if you want to hear it.
Absolutely.
There is no secret. So I'm not kidding. Toughness is a decision. That's all it is. So we've got a guy on our team who does ultra marathons, and he will run 36 hours in a row. I'm not even exaggerating, like 200 and some kilometers. And if you ask him, like, well, how do you do this? And it's not that he's Superman, he doesn't hurt or doesn't, it's like, he just has decided he's going to do it. And there's no debate about it. So I think, just on the mental toughness aspect, or you talk about, how do you stay calm in stressful situations? Decide you're going to stay calm. Like, this is all software, right? You can rewire it however you want. Decide you're going to have certain proclivities and vulnerabilities that you're going to want to navigate around. But that's maybe 20% of the equation. 80%, I think you can totally rewire it. So great. You want to be calm? Decide to be calm. You want to be more disciplined? Decide to be disciplined. There's no magic out there. You talk about the highest performing teams out there. Like, you talk about any team. You can talk about any special forces operations team in the world. I can guarantee you a few things. There's no magic to it. They've got their problems. Those problems are probably personality issues because they have high performers who are high expectation, and personalities are always stronger. We have way more personality issues to deal with than performance issues. And I don't have many of either, to be honest. But if I'm going to have an issue, high probability it's a strong personality that's bearing into it. And they're not perfect. Like people think that there's these ninja units out there. No, it's like someone, I guarantee the high speed team, someone forgot to recharge his battery on his radio and his radio's dead. Like that, it just happens. There's no such thing as magic. So I think when you realize that, all of a sudden it opens a lot of doors because you're like, hey, wait a second. If that unit doesn't have any magic, then we don't have any magic. And there's absolutely nothing stopping me or our team from achieving the exact same that team has achieved. Then you just do the rewiring necessary to get the performance that you want. It's all malleable, man. Anyway, that would be all I have to say on that.
Incredible. Thanks for sharing that. Well, we've had 19 other people on the podcast, myself as one, so let's say 18 so far. One of my favorite, Kevin, this has been well worth our time. So thank you so much for investing it with us and our audience. I know there's a lot of folks who are really going to appreciate this, and we'd hope to catch up with you again sometime in the future, be it in a 6 months, a year, or whenever when you retire from your current position. I think you've got a huge opportunity for a second career that would be quite engaging for sure. So anyway, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. We have Kevin Sear from Vancouver, I guess, Canada, and we really appreciate your time. Kevin, if folks wanted to reach out to you, if that's of interest, or where can they follow you if they want to find some more information about what you've shared with us today?
Yeah, thanks. So it's I can be found on LinkedIn. So it's just my name, and I'm the guy in green. The bald guy in green in front of the armored vehicle. It's not hard to find the profile, man.
Yeah, Kevin. I follow Kevin on LinkedIn. We're connected. He posts a lot of great stuff. So definitely worth the connection there. And again, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We learned a lot. Thanks again for your service. And we look forward to connecting again soon.
All right. Thanks very much, guys. Appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Kevin.